Our last presenter, okay, Fred is on. So far, we've shown you three companies that, are all listed in Canada that we really like. And so we've asked Fred to be on to give you a little bit of a different flavor of how you can gain exposure to Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies. And so Fred Pai, he's our last speaker. He's the CEO of 3IQ. 3IQ has more than 900 million in assets under management, and they offer investors a convenient and familiar product to gain exposure to crypto assets rather than right out holding the currencies. The QBTC was Canada's first publicly traded Bitcoin product. So congratulations on that. And Fred, I'm going to pass it over to you.
To start off, a lot of people say, well, why did you do this? And I say, well, it's because I've been there before. Back in 1983, I was working with a company called Guardian Trust Company. And Howard Kelly, the president, had come up and said, you know what? We need to list our gold, silver, and platinum certificates on the Montreal Stock Exchange because there's no way investment advisors have access to investing in gold, silver, and platinum. So we approached the Montreal Stock Exchange and the Quebec Securities Commission. We said, we'd like to list these. And they say, hang on a second. It's non-traditional custodians. It's volatile. It's speculative. And gold is used for criminal purposes. Why would we ever accept that? Well, following 3 hard years of work, we finally got accepted, and Guardian Trust was the first to list gold, silver, and platinum certificates on the Toronto Stock Exchange. So on the Montreal Stock Exchange back then. So a lot of people say, well, wow, 3IQ has been such a great success, an overnight success. And just to correct you, Victoria, we've actually just crossed over 1.4 billion today. Up from 900 million when we sent you this in December, I think. But the road was not an easy road. We started in the fall of 2015. We wanted to, we was running a multi-asset momentum portfolio for Landry Investment Management. We wanted to include Bitcoin in our portfolio, but there was no way to buy it. So we decided we would talk to the Toronto Stock Exchange, and we met with John Mountain in 2016 and said, hey, John, how would you like to be first? He says, we'd love to be first. Let's make this happen. We filed our first prospectuses, and then they created the launch pad, which slowed things down a little bit, but continued on after the peak. And we launched the first global crypto asset fund in March of 2018. So in March this year, it'll have the first 3-year track record for a digital asset fund in Canada. I think we looked at the last 12 months, it was up 361%. So it's going to have a good 3-year number. We continued and filed again, and we were about to get listed in June of 2018. However, John Mountain got an aggressive pancreatic cancer and he passed away, which was very tragic for him and his family, but also for us. The new group came in, they said, you know what, we don't get this Bitcoin thing, and they wanted us to start over again. But in Canada, if the regulators reject your portfolio or your fund, in this case, you're allowed to challenge them. And they responded to us with the 5 or 6 reasons why they wouldn't accept us. We took them to a public hearing, which is basically going to court for 3 or 4 days in the summer. And by October 2019, we won the right to launch a Bitcoin fund. Having said that, we filed a syndicated fund in 2019, and it wasn't until April 2020 when we were able to launch the first fund right at the peak of the pandemic. We said, what could possibly go wrong now? And the fund only launched, but it launched with a $15 million, first market cap was $15 million. Having said that, 2020 was a record year. 3IQ's Bitcoin fund is the single largest growing fund from zero in 9 months that Canada's ever seen, going to 1.4 billion. So the challenge with the Ontario Securities Commission, they said, look, we've got a couple of challenges. Is number one, we don't understand the custody, we don't understand the auditability, we're concerned about pricing, we're concerned about market manipulation and what's not in the market interest. So we spent a year and $4.5 million, a couple of years and $4.5 million more to produce 10,000 pages of testimony and challenge the regulators. So when we won, the judge's first statement was, this is a landmark victory. he said the application that we were submitted challenged the fundamental concepts of securities legislation in Canada. And I think that was really key, because they basically said the application isn't about the merits of the Bitcoin fund. It has to do with the role of regulators to approve or disapprove the merit of the fund and not the securities beneath it. And it's also outside the scope of authorities, regulators, to immunize investors from volatility or speculation or risk-taking. That's part of the capital markets credo. So the first thing they challenged us was custody, and we clearly won because Seidel, trust company out of Canada, and Gemini, the Winklevoss brothers company out of New York, were both qualified under 81102 as compliant custodians. Gemini had completed their SOC 2 Type 2 compliancy, and they are a trust company. We keep everything in cold storage, and we passed all the cybersecurity regulations. Next was the auditability. They challenged and say, we're not sure an auditor can audit a crypto asset fund or a digital asset fund as such. Well, Raymond Chabot Grant Thornton came out and said, well, we've already audited their other fund, 2 years in a row, and we beg to differ. We think actually auditing the blockchain is actually easier than any other kind of physical audit. Then they talked about pricing, and this was really quite true. It was very tough to find the real price of Bitcoin at any given point in time in the day where it trades. And you have to be able to create an index that is free from market manipulation. So we're very fortunate that one of our owners of 3IQ is a company called Van Eck out of the United States. You may have heard them. They've attempted to launch an ETF a number of times. But they also own the MBIS and Crypto Compare Index company out of Europe. And what we did is we worked with them and designed and built what we consider a bulletproof index, and probably the best pure index on Bitcoin. It's followed on Bloomberg under the symbol MBIBTC. The next was the concept of market manipulation. And although the judge said, well, there is evidence of market manipulation and associated risks in investing in Bitcoin, there's also sufficient evidence that there is a real market for Bitcoin with actually real trading. So we were able to make sure that we took certain markets out of our index. And Bitcoin was always subject to the standard Bart-Simpson chart pattern, or the inverse Bart-Simpson, where over a period of time, it would shoot straight up, have a horizontal move for a day or two, and then get back its full retracement. And the same as the opposite is true. But nobody could prove that had to do with actual physical market manipulation. They weren't real bona fide orders. Having said that, the OSC, for those of you who haven't had the pleasure of dealing a lot with regulators, is they do have one big stick. They can always say it's not in the public interest for us to launch this fund. And basically, the judge said, while public interest jurisdiction under the Act is very broad, meaning there's a lot of ways to use it, it's not infinite. And we used testimony that said basically 5% of Canadians at the time were holding digital assets. And with the collapse of Quadriga CX and Einstein Exchange, we suggested that 110,000 Canadians lost 250 million. And we suggested it's about time for the Ontario Securities Commission to stand up and regulate. So a lot of this sounds kind of antagonistical. Yes, it was expensive. Yes, it did take a lot of time to do. But the reality is, working with them, we got it right. And we believe wholeheartedly Canada is leading in this role. We have by far the best exchange-listed product anywhere in the world. And Canadians have been very fortunate to benefit from all the hard work that we put in. So it was a very big day when we celebrated the launch on the Toronto Stock Exchange with the virtual market opening, as everybody does right now because of COVID. But there was over 70 million social media hits on people celebrating with us the launch of QBTC on the Toronto Stock Exchange. Recently, however, we were working on building out our research department, and we were approached by Delphi Digital out of the US. We believe Delphi Digital produces second to none the best institutional research on the digital asset space and the crypto space in the world. They have taken a small ownership position in 3iQ, and we've signed a multi-year institutional agreement with Delphi Digital. Delphi currently, and you can get these on our website, copies of the state of Bitcoin and the future of Bitcoin in 2021, and the state and future of Ethereum as well. The Bitcoin Fund today, as I mentioned, is over $1 billion of AUM. It trades significant. In the big trading days in January, we were trading upwards of 150 to 200 million shares a day. So by far the most liquid fund of its type. There is a player in the United States that's significantly larger at 20 billion that has more volume. But we've been able to certainly capture our share of the market. We also in December launched the Ether Fund to capture the second digital asset developed in Canada that powers the Ethereum blockchain. The Ether Fund was launched at $10 and has more than doubled in the first month and a half of it being launched. It now has crossed over $280 million US, I believe. Having said that, the really exciting one I mentioned before is the 3iQ Global Crypto Asset Fund. The Global Crypto Asset Fund has gone from a low of $4.97 to a high of over $35 in the last year and a half. An extraordinary expansion for a fund that invests in Bitcoin, Ether, and will be opened up to invest in other digital assets of superior quality. So finally, we encourage everybody to log into our website at 3iq.ca and register for, we have two really cool things. We do have monthly reports on our different funds for you to follow them. Two, our website will show you the amount of Bitcoin we own, and we also publish the kind of top coolest crypto digital asset events that happen in Canada over any given week. And we've crossed over 10,000 users of our webinar, of our newsletter. We are hosting a webinar tomorrow. You can find the invitation for that on our website as well, which will spend a lot more time going into the actual mechanics of the Bitcoin Fund, why it works, why we believe it's the most powerful fund of its type in the Canadian market. So with that, Victoria and Tina, I'm happy to open it up for questions.
Yeah, thanks. I'm glad that you mentioned your newsletter. I was going to bring it up. I've spent a lot of time on your site as I was preparing for this conference, and I found it really helpful. So anyone who wants an update on everything current that's going on in the cryptocurrency space in a very easy to use format, definitely sign up for 3iQ's newsletter. I found it great and extremely helpful. So I guess a few questions. So first of all, can we start one? Can you maybe just talk a little bit about your views, on cryptocurrencies and Bitcoin as we head into 2021 and some of the catalysts that you think we're going to see going forward?
Yeah, certainly. There is a lot of talk about the institutionalization of Bitcoin, and we're seeing every evidence of that. We're not quoting on $1 or $2 million positions now. We're quoting on $100 to $200 million positions for our funds. We are discussing things with pension funds and institutions. They are very happy with the regulated status of our fund, and we expect that we will be, the fund of choice for these people. But the real trigger in November of last year was when the U.S. Federal Reserve came out and said, we can print infinite amounts of money. And you could just hear the collective, oh my gosh, everyone around the world going, they're going to print unlimited amounts of US dollars. That can't be good. I've got to buy some gold and I've got to buy Bitcoin. And a lot of people will have seen the ads we ran. If you love gold, you'll love Bitcoin. We're not like our US competitors, it's Bitcoin or gold. We think everybody should probably own both. However, what we have seen with Bitcoin, because of Bitcoin supply schedule, of being a decreasing supply schedule, every time you have a halving, meaning the supply of Bitcoin gets cut in half, you see the value of Bitcoin go up tenfold. So we saw it go from 100 to 1,000, 1,000 to 10,000, and 10,000, we're on our way to 100,000. So like your previous speaker, I'm not sure we'll see it this year, but definitely we'll see 100, we believe, in the next 2 years. And then following that, there will be a run from potentially 100,000 to 1 million. And a lot has to do with the scarcity of assets. And I try and explain it this way. Right now, gold grows at 4% per year. And that shows its scarcity and its strength as a hard asset. Well, Bitcoin also only today grows at 4% per year. So the scarcity of gold and the scarcity of Bitcoin in terms of a supply figure is exactly the same. However, we all know that the computer program will reduce Bitcoin supply to a 2% per year growth rate in the next 3 years. So now you're going to see Bitcoin growing at half the pace that gold grows at, and therefore people will start to chase it. There's only 18.9 million Bitcoins out there, and there only ever will be 21 million Bitcoins ever minted. So I think the stat, which was pretty astonishing to us when they showed it to me, 3iQ basically purchased the entire supply of Bitcoin that was created in the month of January. So it just tells you, how much, how scarce that asset's going to be. And you got to think about it. Bank of Nova Scotia, has a Bitcoin ban. Raymond James has a Bitcoin ban on in Canada. In the United States, you can't buy it at Merrill Lynch or Goldman Sachs or JP Morgan or Morgan Stanley. What happens when these people come to realize that Bitcoin is nothing more than the most powerful internet technology ever invented? So we expect, the road to 1 million is going to be there. Can't really put timing on it, though.
And you mentioned speaking with, some of the larger institutions and the pension funds. So, and also how hard it was to get through the regulatory framework. So there's still a lot of institutions that aren't allowed to own cryptocurrencies outright and do need to look for regulated, sources to get exposure. So I guess, how do you see that evolving over time? What conversations are you having with these funds in terms of, opening up to be more regulated, to get exposure?
Well, so first of all, our largest clients are Canadian mutual funds. Any global macro fund or tech fund, or the good ones anyways, have already, we've been in discussions with, we do private placements with them, they get their Bitcoin exposure, and it can be comfortable because it's in a regulated TSX exchange traded product. So it's legal, it's, we look at it, the challenge was a 4.5-year due diligence session with the Ontario Securities Commission. And as we say, 10,000 pages of testimony. So it was not easy. We really took the line of the entrepreneur. I sold my country home. We downsized the house. Didn't buy our kids new shoes every month. Whatever. No Air Jordans for the boys. But, we knew that the upside, would be very successful. And the real challenge was how do you get Canadians? Most of the Canadians' net worths are in their RSPs and TFSAs. And for the demographic that buys Bitcoin at the beginning was 30 to 45-year-olds, saving and buying Bitcoin in a TFSA has been an absolute godsend for them, because if you believe your asset's going up 10x, well, you want to shelter that one, as far as we're concerned. So But the fact that it's regulated now, we will be passporting this onto different exchanges around the world. We're really excited to have our fund trade 24 hours a day. We think, our real challenge now is, how can I let the regulators, we need the regulators to regulate our exchanges so I can give Pam Draper a big chunk of our money. We already know that Netcoins works with us on a number of different ways in a bunch of different products. We do know, a number of the other exchanges in Canada and the OTC trading desks and the custody solutions in Canada are not there yet. So here's Canada got $1 billion fund behind them, and I can't use it yet to support the infrastructure in Canada. So we're excited to work with regulators to help everybody move this forward.
And then so then you mentioned mutual funds being your largest customer. So what would the split of your fund look like in terms of institutions versus retail?
It's literally a third, a third, a third. It's Canadian institutions is a third, retail's a third, and US hedge funds are a third.
And then just in terms of catalysts and what we should be watching for going forward, any new kind of innovative funds in the space that you guys are thinking of, or things that we should be looking for from 3iQ?
Yeah, well, 3iQ, since the beginning, Victoria, we always had people that say, well, I'm not going to buy Bitcoin until I can go to Starbucks and buy, a coffee with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I would always just shake my head and say, it's like going into Starbucks and say, I've got a bar of gold here, or Canadian maple leaf, gold maple leaf, and I'd like to buy a coffee with that. Yes, you could, technically. And if they took it, then you would. But you're not going to use your store of wealth. I've got, a story where one of my best friends got married in Venice back in 2014 or 15. And we had a big dinner one night, and we were at a restaurant, and they said, we take Bitcoin. And so, the bill came around after dinner, and I looked at the thing and I said, well, how much Bitcoin for dinner? And the guy goes, well, 7 Bitcoin. 7 Bitcoin. Yeah, here, take my phone and go bing. I'm treating everybody to dinner. It's just 7 Bitcoin. Well, 7 Bitcoin today at $50,000 in Bitcoin is probably easily the most expensive dinner I ever bought. And certainly it would be the most expensive coffee you would have ever bought. Again, it all goes back to the first 2 pizzas that were bought that are now worth hundreds of millions of dollars. So you don't spend your store of wealth. So money is going to digital, but it's going digital Canadian dollars. We own a company with Maven Net Systems called Canada Stable Corp. We have launched a Canadian dollar QCAD. It is available on a number of the exchanges you spoke to today and talked about. So if you want to hide, you can hide in our digital Canadian dollar. But we will announce many exciting developments in QCAD in terms of places that will accept now digital Canadian dollars and wallets that will have digital Canadian dollars in them. And you'll be able to send digital Canadian dollars around the world for free. So we're really excited about that. But on top of that comes then for the entire decentralized finance theme, DeFi, which people say, which has to do with Bitcoin lending, Ethereum lending, USDC lending, QCAD lending, where we can literally create an investment vehicle that buys Canadian dollars, digital Canadian dollars, lends it out, and collects an income of 5 to 7%. And you're 100% backed by Canadian dollars. So that looks a lot more attractive than savings accounts that are offered by the chartered banks today. So expect 3iQ not to be sitting on their hands, but to come up with some really exciting products in the next years to come.
Okay, and just before I let you go, there is one question that I did just want to get to. An audience member asking, can the shares be redeemed for actual crypto at some point? They heard that this was possible, and if it is, how does that work?
So first and foremost, our fund is redeemable monthly at a 5% discount to net asset value for the Ether fund, and 5% discount to net asset value, or 5% to trading price, whatever's less. But it trades at a premium, so I don't know why anybody would redeem it. You might as well sell it at a premium and buy Bitcoin. A couple of things that are important. We do have something in Canada called an at-the-market offering. So our fund is in the market making every day. And every time we're adding money to our fund, it's growing the amount of Bitcoin that's accretive to current unit holders. So if we continue at the rate that we did for January, we added 1.5% more Bitcoin to our fund over the net asset value, which means you're getting Bitcoin plus a yield by owning our fund with the at the market in place. It's not always possible, but if it continues at this, it's a positive carry. So, our fund has really been structured well to be able to take advantage and compete against direct ownership, but more so, it completely reduces the cost. It eliminates the cost of the management fee and the expenses to run the fund. So I don't know if that answered your question, but.
Yeah, no, it did. Thank you for clearing that up. That was very helpful. And this question, the next question, actually, it's unrelated. But have you heard or do you think that people leaving Hong Kong is one of the reasons for the recent surge in prices?
You know what? And I'll tell you this, I've been in Bitcoin for a long time, and I've looked to find a reason why Bitcoin does anything, right? Today, for example, we're what? $187 billion of Bitcoin traded worldwide. Bitcoin moved the most when North Korea would launch missiles over the south of Japan. The South Korean and the Japanese Bitcoin exchanges went crazy. People would buy because of that. When Argentina has massive inflation, of course, in Argentina, you're going to be buying Bitcoin. If there's a military coup in Nigeria, of course, you're going to be buying Bitcoin, or problems in Crete or Greece. Bitcoin is two things. It's a risk-on asset, and it's also a risk-off asset. So it has zero correlation to anything. Moving Bitcoin around from Asia to North America is, shall we say, a highly trafficked area. So there is some, but it really is the institutionalization. In our webinar tomorrow, we'll show that the amount of people that now own Bitcoin greater than a year is growing dramatically, which means people are buying it and hoarding it. And there's so little Bitcoin available. As I said, you've got to come on and get on board before early. One of our early pioneers and a good OG in Bitcoin is a guy by the name of Chris Berniski. And Chris tweeted recently, he says, he's saying, no, it's true, you're not early, but you're still not too late. So there's still time to jump on the bandwagon and make significant returns in this asset class, because this asset class will go on for decades.
Okay. Well, I think we'll wrap it up there. That's a good way. That's a good way to end the conference for sure on those words. But yeah, I mean, if anyone wants to sign up for 3iQ's newsletter, again, I find it extremely helpful, very informative. It sounds like you guys have a webinar tomorrow, which we can all look forward to. And I just want to thank you again for coming on. And we're going to be, watching news coming out over the next few months and see what you guys are up to.
Thank you very much for having me, Victoria. I appreciate it.